Yeah, so new strategies and additions to see is they want you to establish and execute a cybersecurity implementation plan, and then how how will you as a pipeline company achieve these and use it as outcome or performance based, and develop and maintain a comprehensive cybersecurity incident response plan. And then the third element there is establish a cybersecurity assessment program to regularly test and to audit the effectiveness of your cybersecurity measures. These all sound really, really good. And this is definitely something that industry associations are very pleased with and happy with from TSA is moving this over. And many of them have been vocal that it is a step in the right direction.
Agreed, right? This is blocking and tackling, so to speak, right? It's good to start building out an incident response plan while your hair is not on fire, basically, when you actually are having an incident, that's not exactly the best time to have an IR plan.
But you still have to be aware there's still items in here that seem prescriptive, or at least you must have or have a alternate of and capture that into your plan. So it is outcome based or performance based, and it is moving in the right direction. So,
and a regular assessment program totally makes sense. Find out what you currently have. They're kind of open on the self assessment versus third party assessment, but in general, getting hopefully an objective look at your current security posture gives you a roadmap, so to speak, on what to tackle first, how to become a more secure.
And the good news is, to be honest with you, many of the pipeline stakeholders have cybersecurity lifecycle, even for their operational technology. They've been working with pipeline guidelines and standards such as API 1164, which is now in its third revision, which also incorporates other pieces from NIST, but also 62443.
Right.
So you get a copy of that R3 version, but the pipeline guidelines have been around for some time, and those have been evolving as well. The cyber has been put into that, so industry has been aware. It wasn't an overnight thing, but obviously it took a major incident or disruption in the U.S. to have TSA kick in these security directives that people are having to abide by and deal with at the moment.
Excellent. All right. So speaking of security assessments, third-party assessments, 1898 performs assessments for clients. Can you tell us a little bit about what that typically looks like? How long do these typically last?
Yeah, so before you can start putting in prescriptive controls and doing a lot of things, you really have to understand what you have. And one of the key things there is identification within the cybersecurity framework. Is you want to be able to identify and then put in things to help you detect, protect, respond, recover. That is all part of the life cycle with that. And so the key piece there is making sure that you address and identify everything from a field assessment, your architecture design reviews such as VADRs, but also doing a deeper dive and understanding what data flows that you may have, the actual system setup, identifying vulnerabilities. And so that really works into setting yourself for a workshop, such as a risk assessment workshop, where you're looking at threat scenarios, impacts, consequences, but building a risk register for that assessment. And I will tell you that, Greg, COVID and Omicron, they really changed the things how we operate within the pipeline industry. Remote access, providing means to the remote operator, which have provided vectors to a lot of the areas within operational technology. But while this was happening, we were able to support remote virtual instances of assessments. But I can tell you that when it comes to really doing a deep dive assessment, you really want boots on the ground to really understand that area. So part of how we do the assessment strategy before we get to the workshop is in five steps. And it's really step one, let us understand, send us policies, procedures. Let's really get an idea of what you have engaged, where your posture is. before we come on site, but also to really get down into the weeds when we are on site and really look at everything from L0 up to that DMZ or L3.5 within the para model. Very important to really flush a lot of that out. There's a lot of unverified trust or trust in systems and people that you typically won't find in a virtual setting. So a lot of that comes true, and really having a facilitated workshop. And as you can see in this is an example report out that we do, and customers and clients, pipeline and other industries and sectors use this as evidence of, hey, this is where we're at. We need to be able to move here. So there's typically a roadmap involved and a remediation roadmap that also puts into a life cycle. So that's kind of the approach there. And the one key piece, though, is that you have to understand this follows a 62443-2 assessment approach. So it's not anything that's undocumented. So the strategy is there. It's a standards-based approach. But we do it as a bit of a hybrid where we're using some consequence-driven, cyber-informed methodology placeholders within our assessment approach. So there's many ways to do it, and even the INL CCE path is another way of doing that.
Well, I mean, the virtual tabletop is okay, but not ideal, right? Nothing like face-to-face interactions, but do your prep work ahead of time remotely. There's no reason to have to do that on site. Good. And you said these reports have been used in audits in the past, and that's great. Okay. Thank you. So now we're going to, this is the part where it's actually interactive with our audience. We should be seeing a question pop up. There we go. Just a quick, simple, question for the audience. Do you have a cybersecurity assessment program in place today? And if so, is it a self-assessment? Are you doing it yourselves? Is it a third-party independent assessment? Or are you just not there yet? So that's all fine too. We'll give it another few seconds to give everyone a chance. And then we'll share the results. It's not just a secret. All right, so great. Everyone should be able to see the results. Hopefully I don't have to. That's about what I would assume, actually. Marco, how about you?
Yeah, the third-party assessment is something that TSA really had in the O2 and O2B, Baker or Bravo. They have kind of they've massaged that language in O2 Charlie, and they do have a FAQ that's out for pipeline owner operators that state that although that third-party assessments are not a requirement, they do highly encourage that, especially from a cold eye peer review. And because the problem with self-assessments, although they're great, is that we've seen internal biases. We've seen accepting certain cultures that could be problematic. It could lead to vulnerabilities. But I guess the one thing that is a bit surprising is the none yet. It's never too late to start. Make sure that you at least go with it from an approach, whether that's a standards-based approach, and following the pattern of TSA is really you want to try to cover all 5 categories of the NIST cybersecurity framework. So no, that's good. That's a great poll. Thanks everyone for
yeah, thank you. That was good. Okay, we do have one question so far, and we may cover this in a future slide, but that gave me a chance to actually check on the question area. If an operator is not in the top 100 critical pipelines, are they still subject to this directive?
Well,
you go ahead. Let's
go ahead.
I was just going to say, to my knowledge, everybody who is subjected to this has already been notified.
That is correct.
If you have not been notified that you need to follow these directives, you're okay is probably not the right word, but you're not required yet. Someday, perhaps, but that's my understanding. Marco,
Well,
unless you.
so the immediate answer is you would have been notified, but the second part to that is not yet.
Right.
And the reason I say not yet is this really started out with the high transmission distribution gas.
Exactly.
And so just keep in mind is that this may be coming for other critical, because that hasn't removed the target off of your back. So right now, these security directives are for the the owner operators that have been notified. However, just realize that up on the hill, TSA is probably working on enforcement of regulatory that may be more inclusive. So the big point there is don't wait for an assessment. Don't wait for something to happen. Be proactive. If you are added to that list, you want to be prepared and at least understand what are the controls that you need to be shooting for now, because effectively these are good practice, although prescriptive, they're still performance-based and outcome-based. So plan now, plan, do, check, act, and be prepared. And I'd say that not just for the pipeline industry, but this could also be MTSA facilities or the chem sector, is that when you look at MTSA, you might be adopting some things that are already in these security directives for even maritime terminals that could be gas or liquefaction loadout racks. So keep that in mind.
Good point. And there are other critical infrastructure sectors that have compliance regulatory effect, and the people responsible or people who are affected has been increasing over time. So
yeah,
agreed. Just think of this as the deadlines are you have a little bit more leeway in your deadlines, but I would start.
And you do have an ability to provide alternate measures if you feel that you're doing things and you're meeting or achieving certain levels of security. I think TSA is in a much better position to be more open-minded. Granted, you are doing what you say you're doing, right? That's the key piece.
All right, so let's talk for a minute about the technical controls. We talked about the strategic ideas earlier before the poll. Let's talk about some of the technical controls. So first, develop network segmentation policies and controls, basically to minimize the impact of a breach. If a breach occurs or something bad occurs, it's hopefully limited or isolated to the network segment that's been affected. Access control is a good idea as well, to basically prevent unauthorized people or processes from accessing your process, basically, right? You change your default credentials from the systems, from your OEM vendors. Make sure that they're changed on a regular cadence. Whatever that cadence happens to be is up to you, I think, but changing them periodically is important. Build a continuous monitoring system so that you don't have to always have eyes on the devices themselves, right? Have a system in place to automate that process and monitor your policies and procedures to make sure that your documentation of your standard cybersecurity policies and procedures are actually in effect within the site itself as well. And reduce the risk by, and this is always a contentious, often talked about area, but when maintenance windows do appear, take advantage of them and patch your systems, right? And patching is more than just applying a patch to an application. Maybe it's time to upgrade the application. Maybe it's time to change the system as well during your maintenance window. Marco, I'm sure you have opinions.
Let's start with the top bullet from my perspective. So develop network segmentation policies and controls to ensure safe operation and isolation. So I think that is great, but you have to keep in mind the last 7 to 10 years we've been pushing for enterprise SCADA. There's even folks that are doing SCADA in the cloud, and so making sure that you have some form of demarcation or lines in the sand to be able to disconnect but operate safely, and even be able to effectively have standard operating procedures that can allow you to, in somewhat at a degraded mode, still be able to operate. That's the world that we live in today, is with that bullet point. And it's hard to do with enterprise SCADA because it really is a totally, integrated and defined architecture. And so it sounds easy on paper, but it does take some engineering and working with vendors and also working with integrators, but it also takes working with subject matter expertise in the security realm to help give you good advice. The second bullet, obviously that makes sense in having that continuous. Definitely monitoring and detection, having something automated, especially in the time that we live in, especially with short staff or not a lot or limited resources, or I would say resources with capability and knowledge within the IECS space. I think having something automated is important. But this bottom point, yes, to unpatch systems and all that thing, but we have to keep in mind, make sure you have a backup plan, a restoration plan. Not all systems respond well to updates, patches, firmware. We've seen items in the past bricked before during an actual firmware update where there was a revision of the hardware that didn't take that specific firmware. And so, oops.
Check with your OEMs.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing too is make sure you work with your vendors and OEMs to make sure they vetted and verified any OS updates before you deploy them. And the reason for that is we do know that there are systems out there that are not able to, at least now, perform well or will be able to take a Microsoft Windows patch, for example. Siemens has got a website. You can go and confirm if this specific OS update will impact their distributed control system or their WinCC application. That's just one instance. That goes with all vendors. But the other part of it too is we've also seen Microsoft themselves sign malicious drivers here recently within the last 8 months. So patching is great, but you may be more secure before patching. So it's one of those things you want to be able to make sure you have a criticality assignment and testing plan and fallback procedure on pipelines, any system that's critical infrastructure.
And keep in mind, there are other mitigations to vulnerabilities potentially, right? You may be able to mitigate the risk of any particular vulnerability some other way other than patching that system or upgrading that system. There may be a firewall rule that could take care of the problem or something else.
Well, I don't think the TSA would be very happy with the results if you've patched, you've secured your systems, and you can't operate. You may be safe, but you can't operate and flow product in the pipe because you're so secure you can't operate. I don't think TSA will be too pleased with that because that still will have impacts and logistical nightmares for getting energy transfer. So some pieces there to be aware of. But yeah, those are the new technical controls, and there's other things that are part of that.